Korea's gender gap in labor force participation rates stood at 18.1 percentage points as of 2021, ranking the country 7th among the OECD member states.
한국 남성과 여성의 경제활동 참가율 격차가 2021년 기준 18.1%포인트를 기록하면서 경제협력개발기구 OECD 38개국 가운데 7번째로 큰 것으로 나타났습니다. 선생님이 격차가 크면 클수록 안 좋은 거잖아요.
Yeah, unfortunately, here we're talking about the difference, the gap here between men and women in the labor force participation rate. So, they say the labor force, that's usually just in common usage, the working age people either employed or available for employment. So they're looking for work. But the gap here, the difference or the disparity between men and women in Korea, unfortunately, is very high. So that's not a good thing.
Exactly. Gap or difference. When we're talking about numbers, it's the difference. But if it's something physical, it could actually be something you could fall into.
Yeah.
So mind the gap.
Mind the gap.
Is the announcement you'll hear in the tube.
In the tube. In the UK, you see that on the subway.
그렇죠.
To be careful of that gap between the platform and the train, right?
네, 그렇습니다. 격차라는 의미가 될 수 있고 틈이라는 의미가 될 수도 있고요. gap, gender gap니까 여기서 말하는 것은 남성과 여성의 어떤 격차가 되겠고 and this is in labor force participation rates. 그러니까 경제활동 중에서도 이제 경제활동 참가율을 구체적으로 얘기하고 있습니다.
Right, and there is an economical definition, economics definition of labor force participation rate. It's actually the proportion of a country's working age population that engages actively in the labor market. So you have to actually be searching for a job. To be or actually have work to be part of this participation rate. So if you're still working age, but if you've completely dropped out of the market, then you're not including this number.
네, 일할 수 있는 연령이라고 해서 반드시 일을 하고 있는 건 아닐 수 있으니까 이 경제활동 참가율이라는 것은 실제로 이게 일을 하고 있는 그 인구를 말하고 전체 비율, 전체 인구 대비 해서 그 비율을 내는 거죠. 지금 이 통계는 2021년 기준 통계입니다. 이게 최근에 발표된 건데.
Yeah, it's as of, right? So from, at, or until a specific point in time. So we're talking about the base year is 2021, so 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. 네, 이제 최근에 발표된 이 보고서인데요. 데이터는 2년 전의 데이터를 가지고 분석을 해본 겁니다.
The city of Seoul has started operating the Seoul Child Development Support Center, which provides free screenings for developmental delays in infants and young children, especially in those who were born during the COVID-19 pandemic.
서울시가 코로나19 유행 당시 태어난 아이들을 중심으로 영유아 발달 지원 검사를 무료로 해주는 서울 아이 발달 지원센터의 운영을 시작했습니다. 여기서 뭔가 검사한다라는 뜻으로 check라고 할 수도 있겠지만 다른 단어를 썼네요.
Yeah, you could also use test, but they use the word screening here. Screening, like a window screen.
Yeah.
So to screen something means you examine it, but also you're examining it to select it or to choose it, or to scan it, perhaps. Another example would be airport screening. You go through metal detectors to screen for any harmful, dangerous, illegal objects there. So here screening would be to examine, and they're examining developmental delays. So these are delays brought on in the development of a child specifically here, but developmental, be careful of the stress there is on the latter part of that word. It's developmental delays.
그러네요. Developmental delays는 발달과 관련된 그런 지연이고요. screening은 검사가 되겠습니다. 발달 지연 검사하겠네요. And this is mostly for children born during the COVID-19 pandemic, or as we might say, the Corona kids.
COVID kids, Corona kids, right? Yeah. Probably born between 2020 and up until most recently, perhaps.
Yeah. Born during the COVID-19 pandemic라는 표현이 나왔죠. 그래서 팬데믹, 코로나 유행 당시에 태어난 아이들을 얘기하고 있습니다.
Iraq has agreed to pay about $2.7 billion in gas and electricity debt to Iran after receiving a sanctions waiver from the U.S.
이라크가 지금까지 자국에 동결돼 있던 이란 자금 약 27억 달러, 우리 돈으로 3조 5천억 원에 달하는 가스와 전기 판매 대금을 이란에 지불하기로 했습니다. 이번 일은 미국이 자금 동결 해제에 합의하면서 이루어졌습니다. 그동안에는 이제 어떻게 보면 빚진 거예요. It was a debt. 내고 싶어도 낼 수 없는 상황이었죠.
They could
이제,
not.
네, 자금 동결이라는 어떻게 보면은 barrier가 딱 이렇게 막혀 있었는데 미국에서 요거를 이제 들면서 이제 다시 이라크가 이란에다가 agree to pay 하게 됐어요.
That's a good explanation. Yeah, that's the crux of this story here,
Yeah.
right? That Iraq has agreed to pay, right? So there has been some deal.
Yeah.
They've come to terms to exchange money and to really pay back, like you said, this debt to Iran. And this was all paved, the road was paved because that U.S., they've lifted these sanctions momentarily
Yeah.
for Iraq to do this because Iraq really needs money right now.
Yeah, and it's quite dependent on gas and
Yes.
electricity from Iran.
Yeah.
And Iran's saying, if you're not going to pay us, we're not going to give you the electricity you need.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of give and take going on there.
Yeah, exactly. So sanctions waiver, right? A sanction is something that a country can do to force another country to comply with some sort of regulation or an obligation. It's a penalty. Essentially, right? So when there's a waiver of that sanction or penalty, that means they're sort of relinquishing that right to that sanction. So they're lifting it. That's
Yeah.
an easy way to think about
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Sanctions는 제재, 경제 제재를 여기서 말하고 있는 건데 이 waiver는 waiving 하는 사람은 아니죠. 네, 지금 설명해 주신
Different
것처럼
word.
네, waiver라는 게 여기서는 해제한다라는 의미가 되겠습니다. 그러니까 뭔가 면제라는 의미예요, 사실은.
Yeah, exactly. So they're giving them a pass.
그쵸.
And in this case, probably momentarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Southeast Asia has experienced record-shattering heat waves in recent weeks in what scientists said was a once-in-200-years event that would have been virtually impossible without human-caused climate change.
동남아시아 지역이 최근 몇 주 동안 기록적인 폭염에 시달리는 가운데 학자들은 이것이 인간이 야기한 기후변화가 없었다면 사실상 불가능했을 200년 만의 폭염이라고 진단했습니다. 사실상 불가능했을 것이다. 이거를 영어로는 really impossible 이렇게 하진 않아요. 그죠?
Almost completely impossible.
또 다른 말로 여기서
Here they
virtually.
use virtually. They used,
근데
right?
우리 팬데믹 기간 동안에
Yeah.
virtual meeting, 뭐 가상 회의
VR.
이거 했잖아요. 이거
Yeah.
무슨 뭐 가상 그런 의미는 아니겠죠?
No, here virtually means almost completely. So
그래요.
99.9%. So not exactly 100%, but essentially
Yeah.
it means 100% here.
그러니까 생각해 보면 우리가 가상 회의 하는 것도 거의 진짜에 가까운
Almost.
거잖아요. 예, 그래서 이 virtually 뭐뭐뭐 하면은 다는 아니지만 거의 뭐 사실상 뭐뭐 이런 느낌이 좀 있는 것 같아요.
For the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part.
그래서 virtually impossible이라는 거는 사실상 불가능. 그러니까 인간의 이런 기후변화, 우리가 만들어낸 기후변화가 아니었으면
Yeah.
지금 동남아에서 우리가 지금 뭐 45도 막 이러잖아요. 이런 일이 없었을 것이다. 이런
Yeah.
얘기가 나오고 있어요.
You remember the basketball player Michael Jordan? When he retired the first
MJ.
time, MJ, he said he's 99.9% certain he will not come back to play basketball.
아,
But that 0.1%,
Yeah.
he came back. So it wasn't virtually, it wasn't impossible. It was
Yeah.
virtually impossible, but that small percentage he was able
그러네요.
to come back.
약간의 여지를 두는 겁니다.
Yes.
Virtually impossible. 물론 인간이 이런 기후변화 야기하지 않았어도 어쩌면은 이런 폭염이 있었을 수는 있겠지만 그렇지만 이제 대체적으로 봤을 때 과학자들이 이거는 우리가 만들어낸 거다. 이런 얘기죠. 자, 그래서 이게 바로 human caused
Yeah.
climate change.
Yeah, this is interesting. So climate change, we
Yeah.
all talk about climate change, but what the scientists are saying, these were human-caused events that led to climate change. And
Yeah.
this is interesting because in the past, I think this whoever wrote this article would say maybe man-made
Yeah,
climate change,
right.
but of course, to be gender equality, politically correct, human-caused. To distinguished from an artificial cause, perhaps. So here they used human-caused climate change.
그러네요. 요즘 이 PC 논란이 여전히 뜨겁습니다. 그러니까 어떤 단어들을 써도 되느냐 안 되느냐 해서 가급적이면은 한 성별에만 치우치는 단어들은 잘 안 쓰려고 그러죠. 특히 예전에 사람과 관련된 단어들에는 남성, man이 들어간 게 참 많았어요. 그러다 보니까 이제는 가능하면 좀 중립적인 단어들.
Yeah.
예전에도 이제 인간이 야기한 뭐뭐뭐 할 때 man-made이라고 많이 얘기했습니다.
Right.
요즘에는 human-made 아니면 human-caused 이런 식으로 표현을 하는군요.
Manchester City has made history by winning its first UEFA Champions League and becoming only the second English club to claim the treble after this season's FA Cup and Premier League triumphs.
잉글랜드 프로축구팀 맨체스터 시티가 유럽 축구 연맹 UEFA 챔피언스 리그에서 우승했습니다. 이로써 맨시티는 이번 시즌 EPL과 FA컵에서의 우승에 더해 잉글랜드 팀으로는 두 번째로 유럽 트래블 기록을 달성하는 새 역사를 썼습니다.
Yeah.
와,
Exciting stuff.
네, 새 역사를 쓰다라는 표현부터 볼까요?
Yeah, to make history here. So
not write history.
not literally. You're not writing a history book. You're making history. So it means that you're doing something unprecedented, never happened before. You've reached a milestone, or like you said, you're rewriting history. You
That's
can say
right.
too, right?
네, 우리는 이제 새 역사를 썼다. 막 이렇게 말하는데
Same in
영어에서
English, yeah.
제일 비슷하게는 rewrite history라고 말하고요. 아니면 그냥 make history라고 할 수 있습니다. 자, 그다음에 this team, Man City, has become only the second English club to win treble or something. Yeah. So what is only the second? And I'm going to ask you about that term too in a bit.
That means there's only been one other team that has done that in the past. So they're the second ones. And they use the word claim here as opposed to win. So they claimed or they clinched, they secured this what we call quote unquote treble.
그렇죠. 뭔가를 다 획득했다. 이런 의미인데 claim something, the treble이라고 하는 것을 획득했다. treble이 영국에서 이제 3이라는 뜻이 있는데
It means three, right?
그렇죠. 네,
Treble,
triple이랑 똑같은 의미로
Triple,
쓰거든요. 영국에서. 그래서 뭐 우리식으로 하면은 뭐 삼관왕 같은 이런 느낌인 것 같아요.
And so that was to explain, Sue. It was the FA Cup win. That's one.
Yep.
The second win was their Premier League title.
EPL.
EPL, and then this UEFA Champions League title, which is probably the most prestigious because it crowns the top pro club in Europe for that year. It's like the Super Bowl. Actually, I don't know if the Super Bowl, connects with you either, but it's the biggest sort of prize for club football, pro football in Europe every year.
아, 그렇군요. 이 트래블이라는 게 FA컵, 그다음에 잉글리시 프리미어 리그 EPL 그리고 UEFA 이 세 개를 모두 다 그 타이틀을 획득했을 때 The Treble이라고 얘기를 하나 봐요.
A former senior executive of Samsung Electronics has been arrested and indicted for stealing the chip giant's trade secrets to build a copycat plant in China.
삼성전자 반도체 공장을 그대로 복사한 공장을 중국에 설립하려 한 전 삼성전자 상무 A씨가 삼성전자의 영업비밀 부정 취득 및 부정 사용 등의 혐의로 구속 기소됐습니다. 구속 기소됐다라는 표현은 be arrested and indicted군요.
Two different things. So if you're arrested, the police have caught a suspect, probably put them in handcuffs, and they're detained. They're in custody.
Sure. 6 other people have actually been indicted but not arrested.
That's right.
This
Without
person,
detention.
Without detention. That's right. 불구속 기소됐을 때는 be indicted without detention이고요. 6명이 또 그렇게 됐습니다. Is it 6 overall or is it?
I think it's 6 including this senior executive.
그렇군요.
And then indicted means to be formally charged. The a grand jury or in the U.S. or a judge, prosecutor thinks there's enough evidence, so you are formally charged.
네, 잠시 후에 더 들어보겠지만 삼성전자 상무 A씨 같은 경우에는 구속 기소, 또 나머지 5명에 대해서는 불구속 기소 처분이 내려졌습니다. So to be arrested or to be detained, 구속되는 거고요. 이 구속되는 것과 더불어서 be indicted가 기소되는 겁니다. 자, 근데 이 스펠링이 독특하죠. indicted인데 indicted가 아니고요. indicted라고 발음을 합니다. C가 묵음이에요. 가운데 I를 또 길게 발음을 하시면 되겠습니다. 자, 이제 삼성전자의 공장을 그대로 복사한 공장을 중국에 설립하려고 한 건데요. 영어로는 무슨 고양이가 나와요. Copycat plant.
That's not necessarily a phrase, but a copycat is just someone who does something exactly the same as someone else.
It's nothing to do with a cat,
No,
right?
nothing to do with the cat. When we
Okay.
were kids, I remember saying that sometimes. Oh, you're a copycat. If someone's copying you or copying someone else.
Yeah. How would you say it as a child to another child that's copying you? What's the tone you would use?
Stop being a copycat. Oh, you're such a copycat.
저 따라하지 마, 뭐 따라쟁이 이런 느낌이 좀 있어요. 어린이들끼리 얘기할 때는. 그래서 copycat라는 게 그런 뜻인데 따라한 plant는 여기서 공장입니다. 그래서 삼성전자 반도체 공장을 그대로 복사한 공장을 중국에 설립하려 했다.
The Ministry of Education has begun to strengthen measures that will help filter inappropriate terms left anonymously by students on teacher performance evaluations.
교육부가 학생들이 교사를 평가하는 교원 능력 개발 평가와 관련해 부적절한 용어 필터링을 강화하는 등 기능 개선에 나섰습니다. So they're going to strengthen measures. And it doesn't say exactly regarding what here, but what is strengthening
They're
measures?
going to take some steps to make it harder for these inappropriate terms to be left by students.
Yeah,
Take
exactly.
action. Measures, you can
Yeah.
think of taking action.
But
And strengthen
strong
stronger actions.
Strong action.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
There's even talk of like legal trouble that kids could get in or something.
Well, actually, the teachers, we'll get to that in a little bit, but the teachers are basically saying this is not strong enough. The
Yes.
Education Ministry is saying, but we are strengthening measures. 자, 그래서 strengthen이라는 게 강화하다라는 뜻이 되겠고, measures는 어떤 대책인데요. 여기서 이제 그 교원 평가에 학생들이 쓰는 내용이 이제 뭐 기억하실 겁니다. 얼마 전에 작년이었죠. 성희롱성 글이 있었습니다. 이런 거를 어떻게 해서 좀 없앨 수 있을까? 이런 고민을 하다가 대책 강화를 하겠다라는 발표가 나온 것이고요. 구체적인 건 잠시 후에 더 들어보겠습니다. 부적절한 용어들이 쓰였다라는 얘기. Inappropriate terms were used and it became an issue last year.
Sure.
They want to filter that and get rid of it because everything is done online, so
Right.
that's why they can filter
Online
it.
anonymously, right?
Yeah.
So terms means words or phrases.
Yeah.
And if something is inappropriate, it shouldn't be used. So someone,
Yeah.
people can make inappropriate jokes. You say a joke that you shouldn't say, for
Sure,
example. Yeah. If something's inappropriate, it shouldn't be used. It's not correct, not proper for that situation.
부적절하다. Inappropriate. term은 여기서 용어입니다. 그래서 부적절한 용어나 단어 같은 거를 걸러내도록 하겠다라는 얘기인데요. 더 얘기를 해보겠습니다.
Hong Kong authorities have vowed to immediately prohibit seafood imports from Japan's Fukushima prefecture in the event of the release of contaminated water from its nuclear plant.
홍콩 당국이 일본 후쿠시마 제1원전의 오염수를 방류하면 인근 고위험군 수산물 수입을 금지하는 조치를 취할 것이라고 밝혔습니다. 자, 그러면은 이 표현부터 한번 볼까요? Vow to immediately prohibit something.
Well, if you vow to do something, you promise to do it. It's like a solemn promise. You are not going to break that. Like, we are doing this for sure. And if you prohibit something, you don't allow it to happen. So that's what they're saying. Like, if you release the water, we will not be importing any seafood from that area.
That's right. Vow는 맹세예요. 그렇기 때문에 vow to do something. 뭐뭐뭐 할 것이라고 아주 확신을 가지고 얘기를 하는 거죠. 단언을 하는 느낌이라고 보시면 되겠고 immediately prohibit. prohibit means to ban. 그러니까 즉각적으로 무언가를 금지하겠다. 이렇게 얘기를 했어요. 그런데 단서가 있습니다. In the event of 라고 했어요. 뭐뭐 하면. 그죠? 네, go on.
If that ends up happening. We expect it to,
Yeah.
but maybe it won't. But
Yeah.
when it does, then they are going to be closing off a lot of, it's the second biggest market for Japanese seafood.
네. 그러니까 일본에서 후쿠시마 제1원전에서 오염수를 방류하면이라는 이런 조건이 붙은 겁니다. In the event of 라는 게 어떤 이벤트가 아니고요. 이러한 상황이라면, 이러할 경우에 라는 뜻입니다.
The Philippines' most active volcano has begun spewing lava, forcing more than 12,000 villagers from farming communities within a 6-kilometer radius of the Mayon volcano's crater to evacuate.
필리핀의 대표적인 활화산인 마yon 화산에서 용암이 흘러내리기 시작했으며 반경 6km 내 주민 12,000여 명이 대피했습니다. So these are villagers from farming communities?
So these would be people who farm for a living. That's what they do.
아, 그렇군요. 우리말로는 12,000여 명의 주민이라고만 했는데 영어로는 좀 더 구체적으로 farming community에 속해 있는 그런 마을 사람들이라고 했습니다. 이 농업 공동체에 속한 사람들이 되겠고요. 그 다음에 within a 6-kilometer radius of the volcano's crater.
Right. So you can think of the crater, it's a circle from in all directions. 6 kilometers in all directions. They wanted them to evacuate, though some people haven't.
Yeah. radius가 반경입니다. So within a 6-kilometer radius of something. 그러면은 무엇으로부터 반경 6km 이내.
A British free climber has been arrested after reaching the 72nd floor of Korea's tallest skyscraper by climbing up the outside with his bare hands.
영국인 고층 빌딩 등반가가 한국에서 가장 높은 서울 롯데월드 타워 외벽을 맨손으로 72층까지 오른 후 경찰에 체포됐습니다. Alright, well, let's have a look at this expression here. 우리말로는 이제 고층 빌딩 등반가라고 하긴 했는데요. 이 free climber라는 거는 뭐 별다른 도구 없이, 장비 없이 아무 때나 이렇게 오르는 그런 사람을 얘기하는 거겠죠? Free climber doesn't mean they're free in terms of time or money. I guess it means no equipment.
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. No harnesses, no equipment.
Just their hands?
Yeah, it's insane.
Wow.
I would never do that. I can't free climb a tree. I'm not going to try to free climb Lotte Tower. That's for sure.
그러니까요. 사실 이 free climber라는 단어 안에는 뭐 고층 빌딩이나 이런 의미가 들어가 있지는 않고 다만 장비 없이 등반을 한다. 뭔가 이렇게 타고 오른다라는 그런 얘기예요. 그래서 free라는 게 no equipment라는 의미고. And then skyscraper.
Those massive buildings that they appear like they're scraping at the sky.
Yeah, exactly. 고층 건물을 이렇게 얘기하죠. 그래서 하늘을 긁는 것 같다라고 해서 skyscraper라고 하는 겁니다.
Korean companies' sales growth slowed and their profitability narrowed last year, according to data compiled by the central bank, as higher borrowing costs and increased prices of raw materials ate into their bottom line.
한국은행이 집계한 자료에 따르면 원자재 가격 상승과 차입 비용 증가 등의 영향으로 지난해 국내 기업들의 매출 성장이 둔화하고 수익성이 악화된 것으로 나타났습니다. 수익성이 악화됐다라는 표현은 영어로 뭐라고 할까요? 수익성, profitability. 그리고 이게 좁아졌다? narrowed?
Yeah, narrow got smaller.
got
so
smaller.
profitability meaning how much money you actually make, right? So it's not businesses bring in money through sales, but depending on their costs, how much of that money do they actually make?
So this word, although it physically means to, it's the opposite of widen, you narrow something. Here we're not looking at a physical thing. We're looking at the numbers getting
Numbers,
smaller.
yes. Yeah, they're making less profit.
원래는 뭐 narrow the gap of something. 그러면 격차를 줄이다라는 의미로 쓰기도 하잖아요. 근데 여기서는 이제 수익성이 줄어들었다, 악화됐다라는 의미로 썼군요. 자, 그다음에 eat라는 표현과 bottom line이라는 표현이 들어간 이거 뭐예요? It ate into their bottom line.
Well, sometimes something might eat into your time, for
Yeah.
example.
What does that mean?
So it would consume. It would consume some of your time. So in this case, you can think of it as these things are consuming their bottom line, and bottom line means profitability.
Yes.
Right? How much your bottom line is your net income. The last item on a income statement. So if you're eating into your bottom line, it means that the company's actually making less money.
일단은 eat into라는 것은 consume이랑 같은 의미입니다. 소비하다의 의미가 있어서 우리가 뭐 쉬운 말로 하면은 뭔가를 이제 뭐 갉아먹는다 이런 느낌이 좀 있어요. eat 그러니까 먹다잖아요. 근데 소비하다 뭐 이렇게 뭔가를 차지하다 이런 느낌이고 그다음에 bottom line이라는 것은 우리가 이제 이 수익성을 계산할 때 결산 보고서 같은 게 있을 수 있죠. 맨 아래 최종 결산 그 결과가 이제 아래에 있다라고 이제 가정을 했을 때 그 아래 있는 거 bottom line 그러니까 최종 결산 결과입니다. 그러니까 여기서는 수익성을 얘기하는 거예요. 수익성에 영향을 미쳤다라는 의미로 안 좋은 영향을 미쳤겠죠. So basically, eating into the bottom line here means the profitability again went down.
That's right.
The same
you
thing.
have higher, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's because of higher costs.
아하, 같은
So
얘기군요.
if it costs you more to make your products, well, you better sell a lot more of them.
Exactly.
Ahead of the launch of the so-called Youth Leap account, major domestic banks are fiercely debating an appropriate interest rate level in response to public opinion that conditions for preferential interest rates set by banks are too demanding.
정책 금융 상품인 청년 도약 계좌 출시를 앞두고 주요 시중은행들이 은행별 우대 금리 조건이 너무 까다롭다는 여론에 따라 적정 금리 수준을 결정하기 위해 고심하고 있습니다. 지금 고민하고 있어요. They're pondering over where to set this interest rate.
And it's not easy to decide.
No, it says here they're fiercely debating.
So on issues, on many issues, right? Especially with this would be internal debates within
Sure.
these different banks. They're trying to decide what is the best rate. So by doing that, you have to make arguments with each other. You have to have discussions. That's what debate is, trying to come to some consensus. But when you're fiercely debating it, it means you've probably got a lot of strong opinions. So when you do anything fiercely, you do it very passionately.
Maybe some people are saying, let's keep it at 4%. No, let's do 2%. No, I want 6%. So it could be people saying, quite strongly.
And they probably all have their own reasons for why they need to set it that, why they think it should be set where they think it should be set.
Yeah. 뭔가 이렇게 치열하게 논쟁을 벌이면서 고민을 하고 있는 모습이죠. 내부적으로 고민하는 건데요. Internally, they are debating fiercely over, where to set this interest rate for this particular program. It's a government-led program. It's to help the youth so that they can,
Save more money.
And build their asset portfolio and things like that. But right now, they're a little bit undecided, I believe, on where to set the interest rate.
And also you have all these different banks, so they're also going to be competing too with each other. So they have to decide where to set. And also the other situation is interest rates are going to start to fall in Korea, but then they need to keep these rates, I think, where they set them is my understanding of it.
So they might want to start off quite low in that case if it's supposed to be preferential for the youth, or who knows, right? Or is it supposed to be higher?
I assume so.
Oh, okay. No, you tell me because I don't know. Okay, so preferential interest rates. Oh, so we assume that it's more preferential if it's higher then, not lower.
Well, yes,
Okay.
yes. So preferential in any case, right? So someone might talk about receiving preferential treatment.
Because you're putting money in, you're not borrowing money.
Yes.
Of course, that's right.
Right,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
So anything that's preferential, so preferential interest rates, preferential treatment, it's better than what other people receive. You prefer to have it because it's better.
아하, 우대 금리를 여기서는 preferential interest rates라고 하고 있습니다. 이 청년 도약 계좌라는 것을 이제 청년들에게 우대해주는 그런 금리를 제시하려고 하는 거죠. 이제 정확히 얼마가 될지는 고심 중이기는 한데 preferential이라는 게 이 사람한테 굉장히 유리하다 이런 의미가 있습니다.
International financial experts have said the U.S. Federal Reserve is highly likely to announce a rate freeze upon concluding its June meeting, followed by one or two hikes in the second half of the year.
미국 연방공개시장위원회 FOMC의 6월 정례회의에서 연방준비제도가 금리를 동결할 가능성이 높으며 올해 하반기에 한두 차례 금리 인상이 있을 것으로 금융 전문가들이 전망하고 있습니다. It's very, very likely something is going to happen. It's highly likely.
Highly likely, very likely.
Can you say it's lowly likely?
No.
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 그렇죠?
You would say it's unlikely in that
Yeah,
case.
exactly. Some things, it's strange because some words, they don't work when you put the opposite word in it.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
just don't work. And some do.
Yeah.
You know. 그러니까 반대 단어를 넣었을 때 되는 표현이 있고 안 되는 표현이 있어요. Highly likely는 뭐 할 가능성이 아주 높다. 이건데 가능성이 아주 낮다라고 할 때는 lowly 쓸 수 없습니다. 그 대신에 it's very unlikely 뭐 이런 식으로 해야겠죠.
You can do highly unlikely too.
That's
you can
right.
do that.
그러네요. 뭐뭐 할 가능성이 별로 없다 할 때 it's highly unlikely. 이거는 괜찮아요. 자, 그다음에 upon concluding the meeting. So it's a two-day meeting.
Yeah, when you conclude something, you finish it. You end it. Right? The conclusion of a TV show or a movie or a book
그렇죠.
or a project or an essay.
Yeah.
The final part. So when they conclude it, they always announce their target.
And that's exactly what it is, as you said. When they conclude it. 이거를 또 다른 말로 upon concluding이라고 한 겁니다.
Authorities in Pakistan have begun efforts to evacuate more than 80,000 people out of the path of an approaching cyclone that could hit the southern parts of the country and India's Gujarat state.
파키스탄 남부 지역과 인도 구자라트주를 강타할 것으로 예상되는 사이클론 비파르조이가 해당 지역에 접근함에 따라 파키스탄 당국이 예상 경로의 인근 주민 8만여 명을 대피시키기 시작했습니다. 자, 이번 헤드라인에는 지금 뭐 파키스탄 얘기 위주로 가고 있습니다만 파키스탄도 인도도 다 비상이에요. So they've begun efforts to evacuate people.
Right, they've actually deployed the army to help with that. So
Yeah.
that's part of the effort. When you put an effort, when we usually we say efforts to do something,
Yeah.
it means you're doing something. You're taking action. So they already are. They're taking action to move people, to evacuate people into shelters.
So this isn't the kind of effort you put in to memorize a word, it's not
No.
that kind of personal
Right,
effort.
right.
It's like a group effort.
A group effort, right.
여기서 말하는 건 노력이라기보다는 그러니까 어떤 조치가 되겠죠. group effort라고 하면은 다 같이 노력하는 것이고 personal effort 그럼 혼자 하는 건데 보통 뉴스에서 나오는 authorities are beginning efforts or this country has begun efforts to do something이라고 했을 때 이러이러한 조치를 취하고 있다라고 볼 수 있습니다.
When you hear efforts, you know that there's many people doing it and there's many things they're doing. There isn't just
okay.
one thing.
아, 그래요.
You're trying many different policies, taking different actions,
Yeah.
different steps.
그러네요. evacuate, 이 대피를 시키기 위한 여러 가지 조치들이 취해지고 있을 것 같아요. 그런 얘기고 그 다음에 an approaching cyclone이라는 표현이 나옵니다.
That means it's coming. It's approaching you. It's on its way. You might talk about having an approaching deadline, for
yeah?
example.
Sure.
So you need to do something because your deadline is quickly approaching.
Yeah, don't miss that deadline.
Right.
If you have a deadline, stick to it. 자, approaching deadline 그러면은 데드라인이 다가오고 있다라는 뜻이죠. 그만큼 뭔가 임박하다라는 의미일 텐데 여기서는 cyclone이 접근하고 있다라는 뜻이 되겠습니다. So cyclones are those that are formed over the South Pacific and Indian Ocean, hurricanes over the North Atlantic and North Pacific, typhoons, of course, here in Korea, we talk about typhoons
In Asia, right.
every now and then. So in the Northwest Pacific.
A research team at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology has developed a nano vaccine that can be universally used to treat pancreatic cancer and colon cancer, according to the Korea Health Industry Development Institute.
와우. 한국과학기술원 카이스트 연구팀이 췌장암과 대장암 치료에 범용적으로 활용할 수 있는 나노 백신을 개발했다고 한국보건산업진흥원이 밝혔습니다. nano vaccine in Korean, nano vaccine in English, nano vaccine. So self-explanatory. It's just one of those things that we just use directly
Sure.
in Korean.
Right, exactly.
네, 그래서 뭐 나노 입자 형태로 인체에 전달하는 그런 백신이 되겠고요. I also want to quickly go over the terms pancreatic cancer and colon cancer, 췌장암과 대장암이 되겠습니다. And let's look at this. To be universally used.
That would mean by everybody. If it's something's universal, it means
Universal.
everybody could use it.
Yeah, universal.
That's my understanding of this.
Exactly. Universal이라는 거는요, 누구나 할 수 있다라는 얘기입니다. So a term you'll use a lot when it comes to the history of voting and women's rights is universal suffrage.
Right.
Which means not just men,
Right.
women too. Everybody should be able to vote. That's what it means.
Nice tie-in to the theme.
Thank you very much. University랑 아무 상관없죠. Universal. 누구나 뭐 이런 의미가 있는데 범용적으로 활용할 수 있는 이란 뜻입니다.
Korea added over 350,000 jobs in May as the employment rate reached a record high for the month. But the number of jobs in the manufacturing sector fell for the fifth consecutive month.
국내 5월 고용률이 사상 최대치를 기록하면서 35만 개 이상의 일자리가 추가됐습니다. 그러나 제조업 부문 취업자는 5개월 연속 감소세를 이어갔습니다. Let's have a look at the manufacturing sector.
If we talk about a sector, we're talking about a part of the economy. So in this case, we're talking about the part of the economy that manufactures or manufacture means to make goods.
제조업이죠. Manufacturing sector, 제조업 부문이 되겠고요. 자, 그 다음에는 fifth consecutive month.
If you hear consecutive, it means in a row, straight. So I'm on this show for 3 consecutive days.
Yes, that's right. 3일 연속 보통 이제 출연을 하시죠. 그래서 연속 뭐뭐뭐 할 때 consecutive, 그리고 날이면 days, 월이면 month, 뭐 이런 식으로 뒤에 단어 다르게 붙이시면 되는데 for the fifth consecutive month니까 5달 연속으로 5개월 연속.
North Korea has attempted to steal personal information by creating a bogus website imitating South Korea's major online portal Naver, according to the National Intelligence Service.
북한이 국내 주요 포털 사이트 네이버를 복제한 피싱 사이트로 개인정보 탈취를 시도했다고 국가정보원이 밝혔습니다. 가짜 사이트, 뭐 fake site 이렇게 말할 수도 있겠지만 여기서 bogus website라고 했습니다.
That's how I would explain it. Bogus means fake. Not real.
It's the same thing then.
Yep.
그래요. 가짜 웹사이트라는 의미가 되겠고 it's imitating or copying. It's like a copycat.
It's a copycat, yeah. We just did that yesterday.
But it's for malicious purposes.
Absolutely.
And this is all according to the NIS.
The NIS, the National Intelligence Service, Korea's spy agency.
That's right.
You know, that collects information from other countries. And the whole idea is really to keep countries safe, right? You've got the CIA in the US,
Exactly.
MI6 in the UK.
And they all have the word intelligence in those in the term.
Usually, right. Mossad
Generally
for
speaking,
Israel doesn't. But yeah, like the English ones do, right.
그렇죠. 국정원을 영어로는요. National Intelligence Service, 줄여서 NIS라고 합니다. 가운데 있는 I, 요 intelligence가 이런 이제 정보를 얘기를 하고 있는 건데, 그러니까 뭐 spying activity 같은 거 하는 얘기를 할 때도 이 단어가 많이 언급이 되고, 미국에서는 이제 미국의 CIA, 영국은 뭐 MI6 등등이 있는데 역시 공통적으로 intelligence라는 단어가 들어가 있습니다. 자, 국가정보원 NIS.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has said his country has started taking delivery of Russian tactical nuclear weapons, despite a global call on the two countries to scrap the agreement.
벨라루스가 러시아 전술 핵무기를 도입하기 시작했다고 알렉산드르 루카셴코 벨라루스 대통령이 밝힌 가운데 세계 각국이 양국의 핵무기 배치 결정을 취소할 것을 촉구했습니다. So we're talking about countries with the UN. They have been saying, don't do this. And yet Belarus seems to have gone ahead and accepted weapons from Russia. It says it started taking delivery,
so that these tactical nuclear weapons have been delivered and they've received them. And they've revamped some Soviet-era storage facilities. That's why they've taken them now. But like Lukashenko wants them himself as well.
Yeah, because they're close allies.
But he also believes that then there's no chance that he'll be attacked by NATO or Western countries. So he wants them.
Of course, and NATO is keeping a close watch on this situation right now. 자, started taking delivery라는 표현 여기서 받기 시작했다라는 겁니다. 우리가 delivery 하면은 배달이라는 의미가 있잖아요. 그래서 만약에 능동태로 started delivering 이랬으면은 이제 보내기 시작했다가 될 텐데 started taking delivery니까 받기 시작했다라는 뜻으로 벨라루스 입장에서 지금 이제 러시아의 전술 핵무기 받기 시작했다. 이렇게 지금 밝힌 거예요. 그러나 이제 서방의 많은 국가들은 그거 하지 마라. 막 이렇게 지금 나오고 있는 거죠. There's a global call on the two countries, Belarus and Russia, Not to do this.
Yes, to scrap
To
the
scrap
agreement.
the
If you
agreement.
scrap something, you
Yeah.
get rid of it.
Don't do it.
So
Yeah.
a global call, in this case, you can think of it as a public demand from the international community. Most of the international community is in agreement saying, don't do this.
Exactly.
We don't want you to.
네, 그래서 a global call or a public call, 그러니까 정말 많은 사람들이 함께 촉구하는 거죠. 그래서 call이라는 게 여기서는 우리가 뭐 telephone call 같은 게 아니고요. 촉구하다의 의미로 보시면 되겠습니다.
At least 12 people, including 6 soldiers, have been killed in eastern Kenya in 2 separate attacks linked to the Somali Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab, according to local media outlets.
케냐 동부에서 소말리아 이슬람 무장단체 알샤바브가 개입된 2차례의 공격이 발생하면서 군인 6명을 포함해 최소 12명이 사망했다고 현지 언론들이 보도했습니다. 이슬람 무장단체, 이 무장단체를 영어로는 뭐라고 할까요? What's the term used here to describe Al-Shabaab?
Ooh, an Islamist militant group. Militant group. So these are groups of people, groups that use violence, and they're doing it to try and achieve social or political change, regime change in a country, and they act a little bit like armies. Right,
Yeah.
they're organized somewhat similarly, and a lot of these countries, though, they'll recruit children. Kill their families and then
Yeah.
take children and force them into being soldiers. And Al-Shabaab is known for doing that.
아, 그렇군요. 알샤바브는 그러니까 소말리아의 그 이슬람 무장 단체라는 겁니다. It's an Islamist militant group from Somalia, and they are known to recruit children. 이런
Yes.
얘기를 해주셨어요. 그러니까 아이들도 강제로 이제 모집을 하는 그런 무장 단체로 알려져 있군요.
Recruit might not sometimes be the right word, but force. They force
Yeah.
children into that because they burn down
They
their villages.
forcefully recruit children.
Yes, that's a better way to say
Yeah.
it. Sure.
And we're going to look at that term again later on. No, actually, is it later on? I think in the show today. It was somewhere, I believe. We'll get to that in a short while.
Okay.
자, 그래요. 이 케냐에서, but this is, you mentioned it's from Somalia, but this happened in Kenya, so it looks like they're moving.
It's right on the border. Right, you look it up. It's right in the northeastern corner of Kenya.
이 무장단체는 소말리아 단체인데 이번에 있었던 2차례 공격은 케냐에 있었군요. 이제 국경지대에 있었다고 합니다.
Al-Shabaab they've done suicide bombings and bombings in that region in Kenya before as well.
Yeah. And this is according to local media outlets.
Yeah, I think we did this same exact term last week.
It
but-
comes up a lot in the news, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So when you see local, you know that it's referring to the country that the story takes place in. So in this case, it would be Kenyan news organizations. So newspapers, TV channels, radio, websites, any organization that distributes news to people, to the public.
그렇죠. 이렇게 뉴스를 전할 때 사실은 이것을 직접 취재한 그런 이제 방송국이나 아니면은 기자단이 있을 수 있고 그렇게 취재된 것을 전해서 알려주는 또 그런 방송도 있고 그렇죠. 저희 같은 경우도 이렇게 전하는 겁니다. 그러다 보니까 어디서 이런 얘기가 있었는지를 밝히는 게 굉장히 중요하고 영어에서는 이제 자주 나오는 표현이에요. 예를 들자면 현지 언론에 의하면 according to local media outlets 또는 외신에 의하면 according to foreign media outlets 이런 식으로 이제 외신에서 이렇게 보도했습니다. 현지 언론에서 이렇게 말했습니다라고 전하는 거죠.
Because you could say global as well, right? Like Reuters and the AP, things like that. You could call those global media outlets as well.
Yeah, I guess so.
The famous red star Betelgeuse, which sits on the shoulder of the constellation of Orion, has behaved oddly in recent years, and astronomers now believe its demise in the form of an explosion is imminent.
네, 오리온 자리에 속한 유명한 붉은 별, 이제 우리는 베텔게우스라고 하는데요. 영어로는 Betelgeuse 이렇게 발음합니다. 자, 이게 최근 몇 년 사이 이상 현상이 관찰됐습니다. 이에 학자들은 이 별의 최후가 대폭발의 형태로 나타날 시점이 임박했다고 보고 있습니다. It could be the end of Betelgeuse.
Remember that movie from the 90s? Was it 80s, 90s? Yeah, different spelling, yeah.
80s,
Yeah,
I
Michael Keaton was in it. And then there was even a
Yeah.
cartoon when I was a kid of it. An animation.
So that was based on the name of this
I guess,
star,
yeah.
right?
I guess so. But when I
그래요.
hear it, I just think of that movie.
Me too, actually. 자, 여기 보면은 이제 스펠링은 BETELGEUSE입니다. 그래서 이거를 이제 그대로 우리는 이제 베텔게우스 이렇게 발음을 하죠. 하나 영어로는 비틀주스라고 합니다. 그래서 요 이제 스펠링 완전히 다르게 한 비틀주스라는 영화도 예전에 있었어요. 88, 90년대에. Anyway, going back. It's been behaving oddly in recent years.
Acting strange.
Acting very strange.
Behave is how you act, and odd means weird or strange.
Unusual.
Unusual. You can, if someone is kind of weird, you can call them an oddball.
An oddball, yeah. Exactly.
Have you ever been called that? No.
Sometimes.
Well, really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess
Tell us
so.
more.
I don't think we have time.
We got lots of time today. Yeah, we can hear all your oddball stories.
Maybe next time.
Okay.
자, 그래요. odd라는 거는 뭔가 좀 이상하다 이런 의미가 있어요. 그래서 behaving 행동을 하다, oddly 이상하게, 별스럽게, 즉 이상 현상을 보이고 있다라는 얘기가 되겠습니다. 자, 그다음에 it looks like, you know, this star is at the point of its demise in the form of an explosion.
Right. Demise means death. Right? Someone dies, it's their demise or the end of something. So, you know, say like a company or something goes bankrupt, you call it the demise of this company, be the end of the company. And they're saying that this explosion is imminent, which means very likely to happen.
Yeah.
That's what imminent means. It will happen shortly. Now, when a star explodes, it actually has a really cool name. It's called a supernova.
맞아요. 네, 굉장히 멋있는 이름인데, but basically it means the star is dead or dying.
Yeah, and explodes.
그렇죠.
Yeah, it does.
네, 별이 이렇게 폭발하면서 생을 마감한다고 하는데요. 이거를 영어로 supernova라고 합니다. 그래서 레이가 말한 것처럼 이 단어 자체가 굉장히 cool하게 들린다. 그러나 의미는 사실 이제 별이 뭐 죽는다라는 의미, 뭐 폭발해서 없어진다라는 의미인데 그렇게 될 가능성이 있다라는 겁니다. demise라는 게 바로 무언가의 최후라는 거고요. supernova 말하고 있는 거고 in the form of an explosion. 우리가 폼생폼사잖아요. 그게 이거예요. 폼, 영어로 form입니다. 그래서 형태. 뭐 이게 좀 우리말식으로 좀 바뀌어서 우리가 폼생폼사라고 하는 거긴 하지만 어쨌든 이 form이라는 것은 어떤 형태를 말하고 이 별, 비틀주스가 폭발하는 형태로 결국은 최후를 맞이할 것 같은데 그게 imminent, 임박했다. This is one of the few words where the Korean translation sounds similar to the English
Oh,
word.
really?
Imminent, 임박하다.
Ah, okay. Mbakata.
Exactly.
The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety has revealed that nearly half of the 162 reported cases of pathogenic E. coli food poisoning in Korea between 2018 and last year occurred in meal service facilities.
식품의약품안전처는 2018년부터 지난해까지 파악된 병원성 대장균 식중독 사례 162건 중 절반은 집단 급식소에서 발생했다고 밝혔습니다. 자, 일단은요, 이게 그 대장균 식중독 사례인데 그 앞에 붙은 병원성이라는 표현을 영어로는 pathogenic라고 하는군요.
Yes, pathogenic. If something is pathogenic, it causes disease. We won't use it for a person. We'll use it for a bacteria.
Right.
Or a virus or some kind of microorganism. So you won't see this used often in everyday life, but if you're looking at a medical report or maybe you're talking to a doctor, they might refer to something being pathogenic.
그래요. Pathogenic. And again, you know, when we talk about viruses or in this case, the bacteria, the E. coli bacteria, this is a term you may hear, but it's very medical, so it's not something you and I will talk about when we're going to a cafe and talking about donuts.
Sue, have you heard about the latest pathogenic bacteria? No.
Exactly. That's not something that will come up in casual conversation, but definitely if you're talking about something medical, something about bacteria or viruses. 자, 그 다음에는요. E. coli food poisoning입니다.
Now, this is something that can come up in casual conversation,
Yeah.
talking about food poisoning. This is where you're not actually eating poison, but you're eating a food that causes your body distress. So I think many of us, unfortunately, have suffered from food poisoning of some kind or another in our lives. And we have to be careful. E. coli in particular, well, it's a very dangerous bacteria. It's from the lower intestine of warm-blooded animals. And if you do come into contact with it, if you do consume it, it can really be quite dangerous.
네, E. coli food poisoning이 이제 대장균 식중독인데요. 식중독 얘기는 뭐 얼마든지 우리가 일상적으로 친구들이랑 얘기하면서도 나 지난주에 식중독 때문에 너무 힘들었어. 이런 얘기 할 수도 있는
네.
거잖아요. So you could say, last week I really had a tough time because, I had a case of food poisoning and I was just sick all week. 뭐 이런 식으로 얘기할 수 있겠죠.
Exactly. Like back in 2001, I think it was, food poisoning put me in the hospital for 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's what it does to you.
It can be, yes. So it's good that we have this information, and it also means that we have to be more careful with our food preparation.
그렇습니다.
The EU has taken a major step towards passing one of the world's first laws governing artificial intelligence after lawmakers voted to approve its draft proposal for the AI Act.
유럽의회가 세계 최초의 인공지능 AI 규제법 도입을 위한 협상안을 가결했습니다. So it's really moving forward to get this, what could be the world's first AI regulating law in place. It's not happened yet, but we're moving in that direction,
Yes.
right? It was a major step towards that.
Meaning a very big step, meaning a very big advancement or an important advancement towards having this law that controls AI.
네. 어떻게 보면은 이제 이런 AI 규제법 도입을 위한 최종 단계에 이렇게 뭐라 그럴까요? 들어간 그런 상황이잖아요. 그래서 중요한 발걸음을 내딛었다. Take a major step라고 표현을 하고 있습니다. And we're talking about laws governing artificial intelligence.
Yes, so if a law governs something, that means it's controlling it or it's regulating it. It's telling it or us or whatever, whoever it might be, how to behave. So in this case, it's about saying AI, the people making AI need to do this or need to make sure that this happens. They are governing it, they're controlling it. In the same way, for example, in the United States, we have governors of states because they govern, they rule over the state and they make sure that laws are followed.
아, 그렇죠. 우리가 이제 주지사 얘기할 때 the governor of the state라고 얘기를 하죠. 근데 여기서는 laws governing AI입니다. 그래서 인공지능을 규율하는 그런 법률, AI를 규제하는 이런 정도로 해석을 하는 게 더 좋겠죠.
Ukraine's agricultural sector could take 20 years or more to recover from the ravages of Russia's full-scale invasion, according to a new study.
러시아의 침공으로 급감한 우크라이나 농업 생산량을 회복하는데 20년 이상이 걸릴 수 있다는 전망이 나왔습니다. 자, 그래요. 이 표현을 좀 보고 싶은데요. It could take more than 20 years to recover from the ravages of Russia's invasion.
Yes. So ravages is like a destructive attacks, something that is not just attacking but also deeply damaging, destroying or hurting. In fact, I mean, sometimes I think about the word ravaging when used for myself. I think of the ravages of time on my face. The wrinkles that start to appear, the receding hairline.
Do you look in the mirror and think, I've aged?
Yeah, sometimes I do, yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is a common expression, the ravages of time, when talking about ourselves. As we get older, we think of our bodies aching or our faces wrinkling, and we say, the ravages of time. Here, though, we're just talking about the damage that the Russian military has done to Ukrainian soil, to Ukrainian land and buildings and farmers and so on.
황폐하게 만든 그런 피해 상황을 얘기하고 있는 건데 이제 가끔은 거울을 보면서 세월이 참 어쩜 나한테 이럴 수가 있었을까. 뭐라 그럴까요? The ravages of time을 우리말로 번역하기가 참 쉽지가 않은데 세월이 참 야속하기도 해라. 이런 느낌이에요. 근데 어쨌든 그 세월의 피해, 라고 말하면 좀 너무 심하지만 어쨌든 거울을 보면서 여기저기 없던 주름이 생기고 그다음에 좀 축 처지고 이럴 때도 쓸 수 있는 표현이군요.
네네네.
ravage라는 표현. 자, 그래요. ravage 자체는 그러니까 뭔가 황폐해진 것을 말하고 있습니다. 그래서 러시아의 invasion으로 인해서 황폐해진 그런 유크레인의 상황 때문에 농업 생산량을 회복하는데 굉장히 많은 시간이 걸릴 거라는 거고요. 이 러시아의 그냥 invasion이 아니라 full scale invasion이에요.
Yeah, it's at 100%. It's not just a little invasion. It's not something small. They just didn't go in with one tank and one soldier. No, we're talking about, thousands upon thousands of troops being involved in this. So if something is
Exactly.
full scale, it's on a large size. It's not something half done or tiny. It's
Yeah.
big.
Exactly. A full-scale war is something you could also maybe hear about.
Yes, or a full-scale performance.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll see. I remember seeing the anniversary of Les Miserables. I think it was the 25th anniversary, and they didn't have a full-scale performance. They had a concert.
Okay.
So they didn't have the full set. They
Yeah.
didn't have the full costumes for everyone. They stood and they sang. It was not a full-scale performance when you would have the theatre all dressed up and everybody moving around stage with choreography and lighting.
Exactly. Full-scale performance는 이제 완전히 전체적으로 다 갖춰진 퍼포먼스를 말하는 건데 그런 게 아니라 좀 축소된 25주년 콘서트를 열었다라는 얘기를 해주셨고 공연 무대에서는 그런데요. 우리가 이제 전쟁이라든지 뭐 어떤 침공 얘기를 할 때 full scale 그러면은 전면전, 전면 침공의 의미입니다.
Growth in the world's demand for oil is set to shrivel almost to a halt in the next 5 years, according to the International Energy Agency, as the expansion of electric vehicles and improving fuel economy reduce consumption.
전기 자동차를 포함한 청정에너지 기술이 전 세계적으로 확대되면서 글로벌 석유 수요가 5년 내 거의 멈출 것으로 국제 에너지 기구 IEA가 내다봤습니다. 굉장히 많이 줄어들 것이다. 그럼 줄다 하면은 reduce 아니면 shrink 이런 단어 생각할 수도 있는데요. 그게 아니라 다른 단어가 여기서 쓰였어요.
Yes, shrivel.
Shrivel.
S-H-R-I-V-E-L. And it means to be greatly reduced or to shrink. So you can use it in place of shrink. They're interchangeable. I have to say, it's one of those words, I don't like the way it sounds, Sue. Shrivel. It's not a nice sounding word.
Yeah, you're right.
It makes me think of when you have a piece of fruit and you forget about it and you leave it out too long. And it's like all the moisture gets sucked out of it and it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and wrinklier and wrinklier and wrinklier.
Sure.
The ravages of time have affected the fruit, so it's shriveled.
네, 과일을 너무 오랫동안 밖에다 놔두면은 이게 수분이 다 날아가고 건조해가지고 쭈글쭈글해지는 이런 상황. 그래서 확 부피가 줄어드는 뭐 그런 느낌이 좀 드신다고 하셨는데 shrivel이라는 것 자체가 이제 줄어들다라는
Yes.
얘기입니다. 그래서 is set to shrivel. That means it is expected to or it is going to shrink. 자, 그래서 this is the demand, growth in the world's demand. 그 다음에는요, 이 표현이 있습니다. Improving fuel economy is something that a lot of countries around the world are focusing on.
Yes, and be careful here because it's not the economy you may be thinking of. We're not talking about the financial affairs of fuel. We're talking about how efficient we use fuel. Another term for it would be your gas mileage. How many kilometers you can get to the gallon. It's getting better and better and better.
네, 여기서 말하는 fuel economy는요, 쉽게 말해서 연비입니다. 그래서 뭐 gas mileage, fuel efficiency 이런 표현으로도 바꿀 수 있을 텐데 이제 아무래도 전 세계가 어떻게 하면은 연비를 더 좀 좋게 높일 수 있을까? 또 청정 에너지를 그래서 활용하는 것도 생각을 많이 하고 그러다 보니 자연스럽게 전기 자동차 생각하고 뭐 그러다 보니 결국은 the world's demand for oil and the growth is going to shrink 이런 얘기겠죠?
The Korean Cultural Heritage Administration and the Overseas Cultural Heritage Foundation have announced that a 700-year-old Goryeo-era transcription of a Buddhist scripture has been returned to Korea from Japan.
문화재청과 국외소재 문화재재단은 700년 전 고려시대의 불교 경전을 정성스럽게 옮겨 적은 것으로 추정되는 묘법 연화경 권제 6. 이것을 일본으로부터 환수해 국내로 들여왔다고 밝혔습니다. 자, 선생님이 이제 말씀하시는 거를 제가 열심히 받아 적도록 하겠습니다. I'm gonna transcribe everything that you say from now on. Go.
Well, we should probably talk about the word transcription. And for those of you watching on Boynan Radio, you can see that Sue is busy writing down every word I am saying. I did
It's
not
too fast.
ask her to do that. This is not dictation. What this is transcription.
네, 선생님이 얘기하는 거 다 받아 적으려고 했더니 안 되겠네요. 쉽지 않습니다.
You need to practice your shorthand, Sue.
Yes, exactly. 제가 그 속기를 배우질 않아가지고. 그런데 이제 transcribe가 이거예요. 받아 적는 겁니다.
Exactly. So, for example, when a politician gives a speech, often we will get a transcript of the speech afterwards so people can see in detail exactly what they said.
네. 그거랑 우리 학교에서 하는 받아쓰기랑은 좀 다릅니다. 학교에서 하는 그거는 dictation이라고 하고요. 이 transcription은 뭐 예를 들어서 뭐 법정에서 빨리빨리 뭐 그때는 손으로 쓰지 않죠.
네.
타이핑 탁탁탁 하죠. 아니면은 뭐 이 경우에는 뭐 부처님의 뭐 가르침을 transcribing 받아 적은, 옮겨 적은 뭐 이런 느낌이라고 보면 되겠습니다. So it's a transcription. It's 700 years old, they say, and it's a transcription of a Buddhist scripture.
Yes, and this term scripture refers to a religious or sacred text or writing of some kind. So in the same way, when Christians will talk about scripture, they're talking about the Bible. Or if Muslims are talking about scripture, they'll be talking about the Quran. For Buddhists, when they talk about scripture, they talk about the writings of Buddha. So it's a sacred text, and it's very welcome back here in Korea.
네, 그렇습니다. 어느 종교냐에 따라서 좀 다르게 해석을 할 수 있겠지만 이제 보통 scripture 그러면은 경전이 되겠고요. 그래서 이제 불교 경전인데 이게 만약에 기독교 얘기다 그러면은 이제 성경책이 되겠죠.